Hey guys, this is Mrs. Brigman, and today we're going to continue with Unit 3, Ratios and Proportional Relationships. Today we're going to move on with Lesson 4, and this lesson is entitled Writing and Solving Proportions. Please find your guided notes and fill in all blanks and examples accordingly. Let's first start with the definition of a proportion. Now, in the previous 3 lessons, you guys have learned about ratios and unit rates, and today we're going to take those ratios and set them equal to one another. When you do this, it is called a proportion. So your definition for a proportion is an equation that states that 2 ratios are equivalent. As a part of your vocabulary word, please write in the example that is seen here. Now, there's a special way that you say proportions, and the way you do this is anytime you see a fraction bar, you are going to use the words is to. Anytime you see an equal sign, you're going to use the word as. So your example for proportion would be read as 3 is to 5 as 6 is to 10. This is a proportion because we have 2 ratios, 2 comparisons that are set equal. An algebraic example would be A is to B as C is to D. Please press pause throughout the video if you need some extra time to fill in your definitions or write out the solutions to the examples. Alright, we are going to start with example 1 and we're going to use equivalent ratios. And remember, from our definition we know that equivalent ratios are simply proportions. Alright, let's start with our first example, and this comes from the world of sports. It says a person burned about 150 calories while skateboarding for 30 minutes. About how many calories would the person burn while skateboarding for 60 minutes? And we're going to use a proportion to answer this question. You can tell I've underlined my important facts here. And when writing a proportion, you want to start with what the question is asking you to find. And the question is saying how many calories would the person burn? So we are actually looking for calories. Let's think about the units that we're comparing here. We are comparing calories compared to minutes. Because calories came first in my word problem, that category needs to go in the numerator's position. Minutes came second, so it will go in the denominator's position. And now all you have to do is fill in the appropriate numbers for these categories. You burned 150 calories in 30 minutes, and we're going to set it equal to how many calories, and that's our unknown, how many calories. So we're going to use a variable to represent how many calories. Notice my calories are both in the numerator's position and my minutes will be in the denominator's position. How many calories will I burn in 60 minutes? This is called a proportion because we have 2 ratios, 2 comparisons that are set equal. And now we're going to solve. In solving this proportion, you can tell that ratios look a lot like fractions, and in fact you can solve them like that as well. We are going to first use mental math to solve this proportion. The way you would want to do this is look at the numbers that you have and ask yourself, what did they do to get from 30 to 60? Well, they multiplied by 2. So whatever you do to the bottom to keep these equivalent, you need to do the same thing to the top. So of course we would multiply 150 by 2, and that would give us our x value of 300. So going back to the question, how many calories did this person burn in 60 minutes? 300 calories would be your final answer. When writing your proportions, just remember that the order does matter. Since calories came first, I had calories come first in my ratio. Since minutes came second in my ratio. So just make sure you keep everything in the proper order. All right, the second way we're going to talk about solving a proportion is using algebra. So you're going to think back to Unit 2 and solving one-step equations, because this looks a whole lot like a one-step equation. We are trying to solve for a variable. So in solving this equation, what side do you think you need to start on? If you said the right side, you are the winner. Very good. So we're going to start over here on the right side, and we're going to follow the steps of IBS, inverse, balance, solve. So we can see that we're dividing by 25 here. The inverse would be to multiply by 25. Balance, and then finally solve. And on the right side you can cancel out the 25s and you're left with x equals, and over here on the left side we're going to solve our fraction problem, or multiplying fractions. You can cross cancel here by 5, making that 2 and this 5. 5 times 6 is 30. 1 times 2 is 2, and 30 divided by 2 is 15. So x equals 15. Notice in example 1 we used mental math to solve. In example 2 we used algebra. Alright, now it is your turn to try solving some proportions, and you can see we have 2 sections here for you, and the reason is because we want you for 1 through 4 to use your knowledge of mental math to solve for the variable. In 5 through 8 you're going to use algebra to solve the proportion. So I'll show you what I mean by solving the first one in each category. So let's start with number 1 over here. Looking at the proportion, I'm going to work out some mental math and ask myself 5 times what will get me to 20, and of course it's 4. And whatever I do to the bottom, I need to do the top. 1 times 4 is 4. So z is equal to 4. Just as I solved number 1 using mental math, please solve 2, 3, and 4 in this same way. Now, coming over to the second section here, we're going to use algebra to solve. So I'll solve the first one to show you what I mean. I'm going to rewrite this over here in the margin just to have a little bit more space. So this is like solving a one-step equation. It is a one-step equation. So we're going to start over here on the right side and multiply both sides by 49. That's the inverse of division, would be to multiply. Balance, and finally solve. So this cancels, and m equals, now we have 49 over 1 times 4 over 14, and of course always look to see if you can cross cancel. And I think of the number 7 as a common factor. So 7 goes into 14 twice. 7 goes into 49 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. 1 times 2 is 2. And we can simplify this. 28 divided by 2 is 14. So for 6, 7, and 8, you're going to use algebra, use this method to solve the proportions. Remember, we will go over these tomorrow in class, and your teacher will be looking for each of these processes to assure that you did your homework properly. So use mental math for 1 through 4 and algebra for 5 through 8. Alright, for example 3, let's talk about writing and solving a proportion. There are different ways that you can choose to set up a proportion, and we're going to use this example to help us. It says, yesterday you bought 8 bagels for $4. Today you want only 5 bagels. How much will 5 bagels cost? So we have here the number of bagels and the cost for yesterday, and we have the number of bagels, and we're looking for how much those will cost. So I think my first comparison, I'll do the cost compared to the number of bagels. All right, so let's think this through. Yesterday, the cost was $4 and I bought 8 bagels. So I've put 4 up here in the numerator's position because that's my dollars, and I'm comparing it to the number of bagels, which was 8. Today I only want 5 bagels, and I'm looking for how much will that cost. So the cost is my variable. That's what I'm looking for, and I want only 5. That's the number of bagels that I want. And now I will solve the proportion. Now, as I'm looking at the denominators, I don't think I can do mental math because I cannot think of a number. I can't, 8 times what will get me to 5? I can't think of a number. So I'm going to use the second method, which was algebra. They divided by 5, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 5. That way this will cancel. Multiply both sides by 5, and I'm left with x equals, and I can't cross cancel, so 5 times 4 is 20, and 1 times 8 is 8, which this is kind of hard to read, so I'll come over here. X is equivalent to 20 over 8, and I got this from my inverse balance solve over here. 5 times 4 is 20, and 1 times 8 is 8. Now, of course, you can simplify this, so we'll go ahead and divide the top and the bottom by 4. That's going to give me 5 over 2. 5 divided by 2 is 250. So how much will 5 bagels cost me? They're going to cost me $2.50. Now, another way that you could write this proportion is you could just compare them differently. You could compare the bagels that you buy, the number of bagels you buy today, compared to the bagels you bought yesterday, and set that equal to the cost of today compared to the cost of yesterday. So I'll change the color of my pen, and I'll work this second method up here in this space. So what I'm going to do is compare this time. Last time I compared the price to the number of bagels. Today, for the second time, I'm gonna compare the bagels that I buy today compared to the bagels that I bought yesterday, and I'm going to set it equal to the cost of today compared to the cost of yesterday. So let's just fill in the blanks here. The bagels that I want today is equivalent to 5. The bagels I bought yesterday is 8. I bought 8 yesterday. And the cost, I don't know how much it's going to cost me today, and I'm going to compare it to the cost from yesterday, which was 4. And then using mental math this time, I can solve. And the reason I'm using mental math is because I know that 4 times 2 will get me to 8. So what number times 2 will get me to 5? And that number is 250. So you can see in both methods you get the cost of 5 bagels is equivalent to $2.50. Alright, for the last example, we are going to look at the Empire State Building, and this example says at maximum speed the elevators in the Empire State Building can pass 80 floors in 45 seconds. Follow the steps below to find the number of floors that the elevators can pass in 9 seconds. So first let's see what the question is asking us. It is saying to find the number of floors that the elevators can pass in 9 seconds. So we are going to be comparing the number of floors compared to the time, seconds. So let's look at the information we know. We know that it can pass 80 floors in 45 seconds. So 80 to 45. Notice that floors came first, so that comes first in my ratio. 45 came second, so that comes second in my ratio. The question says find the number of floors, so that's what you are looking for. That is your variable, and then your seconds would be 9. And then from there we can solve. I'm going to use algebra this time to solve this problem. So we'll start on the right side since that's where my variable is. They divided by 9, so remember we're going to follow the steps of one-step equations, inverse balance solve. So I'll multiply both sides by 9. This cancels, and x is equivalent. Now I have 9 over 1 times 80 over 45. So it looks like I can cross cancel here by 9. 9 goes into 9 once, and 9 goes into 45 5 times, and then multiply. 1 times 80 is 80, and 1 times 5 is 5. 80 divided by 5, I need to solve 80 divided by 5. And the answer is 16. So x equals 16. And if you're not sure what it is you just found, go back to your question. What were they wanting us to find? They were wanting us to find the number of floors that the elevator can pass in 9 seconds. So in 9 seconds, the elevator passes 16 floors. All right, it is now your turn to complete one proportion problem. This question is not in your guided notes, but you do have a large amount of white space below the Empire State Building problem. So please just draw a line to separate the two problems and try this example here, and I'll read it to you. It says, a car travels 320 miles on 10 gallons of gas. How far could the car travel on 25 gallons of gas? Use your knowledge of writing proportions and solving proportions to solve this problem. See you tomorrow.